So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mobile App Performance Onion. First of all, thank you so much for joining our webinar. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to ask any questions. You have the Q&A option over Zoom that you can use freely. I will try to make sure that I will go through all the questions. And the second point is this is our first webinar as organizers, so bear with us with any technical issues and difficulties that may arise. I hope we do not get to that, but I'm just giving you an heads up. Other than that, so today João and I, so João is the head of product at Codavel, has been working with the mobile app industry for quite a while now. And we have been learning a lot about what's happening within the mobile app industry. And today, basically, we'll be focusing on trying to peel off the mobile app success onion. And the analogy for the onion is rather simple. So we'll start with the outer layers, which are basically what everyone wants in a mobile application as the owner of a mobile application, like success. So success in this case typically means that you want a lot of users using your application, you want your users to be happy, you want good ratings, you want conversion, and in the end you want revenue either for selling something or for advertisement. And then we will take this outer layer and correlate it with inner layers. So inner layers are things like how interactivity and responsiveness of a mobile application affects the success of a mobile app. And then after, I hope we convince you that interactivity and responsiveness are super important, we will correlate that with a further layer, which is what happens underneath these responsiveness and performance KPIs. So I hope, again, any questions, feel free to use the Q&A session. I will try to go through all of them. But shall we start? All set, João?
All set.
All right, let's do it. So starting from the very beginning, right? So as I mentioned, success for a mobile application basically means that you have a lot of users. Your users are super happy with your application. They are coming often. They spend a lot of time in your app. They buy a lot of things in your application. And this is typically what everyone wants in a mobile app. So you want to have optimal customer sentiment metrics, so people enjoying and rating your application and referring your application to their friends. You want them to be highly engaged with your application. And the end result of all of this, hopefully, will be that you will get your business intents, can be revenue, can be just a large user base, can be monetizing through advertisement, whatever, right? And typically, when you're building a mobile application, typically what you think is things like, is the app easy to use? Like, is what I'm providing to my users, the content, either the content or the products I'm trying to sell, are they interesting for the users? And finally, a typical and very common question is to focus a lot on design. So does the app look cool? Is it pretty? Is it nice to the eyes? So these are typically the first things that come to mind when you think in a mobile application, if you haven't went through the journey. But the fact is, if you ask users what they really care about, and this is data from Google, for example, actually the thing they care less is design. It's how the app actually looks. At this point, the users, what they really care about is how fast does the app react to their intent. So we can call it speed, we can call it interactivity, responsiveness, a lot of words, but in the end is when the user does an action in your mobile application, how fast does it respond? And this is what you really should be caring about, because that's what users care about. So the questions you should be asking when you're thinking about building a successful mobile application is the app performing as I expect it to be? Most importantly, is it performing well for every user? or at least for the vast majority of users, including users with lower end devices in different regions, different network connectivity, is it providing a smooth experience? Because if it's not, as you will see, you will be leaving money on the table because those users will get frustrated, and as a consequence, you won't be able to monetize that. And overall, what you want to ensure is that the entire user journey is fast. So there are no bottlenecks for the user in terms of waiting for something to happen. Like when I'm trying to buy a product in a mobile application, if I take too long between I've picked the product and I want to buy it, if that takes too long, basically you'll be losing users throughout that process, similar to video, right? So if you're trying to provide video to your users through your mobile application, if the video takes too long to load, a part of the users will basically drop out. And as a consequence, you won't be able to monetize that part of your user base. And so to give you a few examples, like it's not very important to look at the exact numbers because different applications have different numbers. But one thing that is very common is that this responsiveness or interactivity metrics are highly correlated with the success of mobile applications. So for example, the one I appreciate the most, or I like the most, is when you look at, for example, e-commerce applications, there is a very strong correlation between time to interactive. So how long does it take for your application to become interactable for the end user? And there is a strong correlation between this time to interactive and conversion rates. And as you can see on the plot on the top right, after a certain threshold, if your app takes too long to become interactive, the conversion rate will drop dramatically. And that, as a consequence, you'll be leaving money on the table. And actually, when you look at the entire journey of a user through your mobile application, this phenomena of being fast and providing the intended action to the end user has a tremendous impact in terms of conversions throughout the entire funnel of the user journey. And when you look at things like video, for example, like we have this one is old, but it's still very actual. The performance benchmarks by Akamai that show that when you're trying to provide a video to the end user, and when the user presses play, you have 2 seconds to deliver the video. And after those 2 seconds, if you don't deliver the video, users will start to drop out. And most interesting is that they will start to drop out at a very fast rate. So each additional second that you take to deliver the video to the user basically results in almost 6% more user abandonments just due to the fact that you're not providing the video to the application super fast. So this is the classical example for video. More recently, we found one that is a little bit more aggressive, as I will try to explain you. This is from Snapchat, so probably this is also related to the fact that the user base is younger. But for Snapchat, the threshold is also 2 seconds, but the game is different. Of course, if in the Snapchat application, they don't deliver the snap, so that short video that the application is all about, within 2 seconds, the entire user base moves on, either dropping out of the application or moving on to the next snap, to the next video. But you have up to 2 seconds. After those 2 seconds, everyone is out. And so now think that if this is a snap of a friend, this is not very critical, although it affects your user experience. But now think that you're trying to provide an ad to your user to monetize that user section. If that ad takes too long to load, the user will move on, meaning that you won't be able to monetize that user session. And as a consequence, you're basically leaving money on the table due to the fact that the app was just slow. And again, going back to the point I made before, Remember that there are a lot of things that matter for the user, but as I've shown you, like the number one thing that user care about is interactivity, is how fast your application responds to the user intents. So now, João, if you're ready, João will guide us through like what are these interactivity, or as we call them, the performance KPIs that matter, and what is the correlation between these performance KPIs and the business outcome that you want to have. So, João, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rui. So, as we just mentioned, matching app performance with business metrics is crucial for any mobile application. I mean, to continuously improve the customer experience and customer journey. How well an app performs has a clear impact on the user experience, which by consequence will have an impact on engagement and conversion rates. And by assuming a typical customer journey, it's possible to map which experience touchpoints have the most impact on these metrics. For that, we took two examples from our partners and their journeys. They are simple ones, and one is for the case of video streaming, and then another for the case for e-commerce. Okay, let's start with the first one, video streaming. Please change the.
Sorry.
Slide. Okay. In green, you see the customer journey mapped and all the steps since the user opens the app until the conversion. And in blue, you have the performance KPIs matched for each of the steps. Okay, the performance KPIs we pick for video streaming were the time to interactive that we mentioned already. It measures the point which the app is both visually rendered and capable of reliably responding to user input, or in other words, become interactive. The scroll or search load time that measures the time required to fetch and display the full content when the user is scrolling through the app or searching. The playback failures, they give us the number of videos that failed to play due to an error. The playback failures can happen at any point during the video playback and can cause prematurely ending, or just the video just not started. Then we have the startup time that measures the time that the viewer waits for the video to play. The rebuffering events that measures how many buffering events are happening, how long they are, how frequent, and this must be taken into account because every time a video starts to stall, the user experience is highly affected. And last, we have the bit rate or video quality that measures the average bit rate that the user is experiencing during the stream. So mapping this experience and making some sense of this, every user journey starts when the user touches the app icon. And from that moment further, the app will start loading and until it becomes interactive. The longer it takes for the user to start interacting with the app, the higher will be the probability of dropping off. So we need to pay attention to the time to interactive compared with the drop-off rates from our app. But if the app becomes fully interactive, we can assume that the user will scroll through the list of videos they want to see or just search for a specific one. And the longer it will take to load the list of visible videos and display all the searches that the user was wanting, the fewer options they will be exposed to, and the higher will be the probability of dropping off. So we need to pay attention to the scroll or search load time compared with the drop-off rates and the number of options, video options that were displayed, rendered to the user. Assuming that all goes well and the user just selects a video to watch, the play button will be pressed. If a playback failure occurs prior, the user will not be able to see the video and will probably drop off or try another one. So again, we need to be paying attention to the number of playback failures that happen and the number of users that leave even before the video starts to play. Assuming there is no problem with the playback, as soon as the user will press the play button, the video will start its initial loading. And the longer it takes for the video to start, again, intuitive, the higher the probability of the viewer exiting the video, probably even before starting or at the first moments. And this is even more impactful when you when you take like Snapchat, for example, a video,
short video, yeah.
short video format, yes.
Like you're more patient if it's Netflix, you're less patient if you're scrolling down, I don't know, Instagram or any kind of application like that.
Usually with autoplay videos, this happens a lot. So you need to analyze the startup time, again, compare it with exit before video start and with the number of videos that were actually watched.
Yeah.
And if the initial loading is done, the user will start immediately to watch the video. And at this stage, the expected experience is smooth and uninterrupted. So always with the highest quality and with no interruptions. But if we have buffering events starting to occur, or if the bit rate is not enough, the experience can be unstable and probably the user experience will not be the best. And again, we need to understand what is happening with our buffering events and bitrate and compare them with what's the actual drop-off rate of the app, of the video, because you can abandon just the video, the average watch time of your users and the videos that were actually completed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this startup time and rebuffering, like for me, the most clear picture is my youngest daughter. Like I've seen her, what actually was my phone, flying across the room many times because either the video didn't start or because it stalls in between, and like that's the extreme of the impact on a user. But the reality is that today, like everyone is getting more and more impatient about these kind of phenomena in any mobile application, and not only related to video actually. And so you should be really paying attention to that. So I guess you want to jump to the next one, right, João?
Yes, we have another example. This one is about e-commerce. Okay. Again, we have the customer journey in green and the KPIs in blue, the performance KPIs. And for this case, it's a bit different from video streaming, obviously. We start to the time to first paint. That basically measures the time when the first pixel is painted onto the screen. It can be like the bell icon on the background, whatever. I will give you an example later. Then we have again the time to interactive, measures the point at which the app becomes interactive. The scroll search load time, again, similar to what we saw in streaming, measures the time it is required to fetch and display the full content. In this case will be a list of products. And then we have the page load time. It's the time that is required to load the full page, in this case, a product page. We are talking about e-commerce. Sorry. So again, the journey starts when the user touches the app icon, and from that moment further, the app will start loading until the first pixel is displayed. And this is important because the longer it takes for the user to have any visual cue that the app is working properly and that something will happen after, higher the probability of the user just leaving. Okay. Still at the beginning of the interaction, the user will start the journey as soon as the app starts to become interactive. And the next important touch point is exactly that: how long it takes for the users to start seeing the products and basically interacting with the app. From there, we can assume that the user will scroll through a list of products or just try to search for a specific one. And again, the longer it takes for this list to be visible through the user scroll or to display all the products that were searched, the fewer products will be exposed to the user and the higher the probability of things dropping off. So paying attention to the scroll load time against what's my drop-off rate and the number of products that were actually rendered to the user. Assuming all goes well, the products load and the user will pick one or select the product selects the most and will be taken to the product page of that product. In this page, we need to pay attention to how much time it takes to become interactive and how much time it takes to load the full page. Again, we need to pay attention to what are the drop-off rates at this stage, what were the product page view, and what products were actually added to the cart.
So João, just one question there. Like, I know that different e-commerce services have different notions, but from your perspective, on a product page, what does it mean to become interactive? Is it loading the buy button, or is it loading the first image of the product? What does it mean?
Yeah, in this case, the time to interactive, we can see it as, for example, loading the initial description of the product and the pay button, and then you have the full page load where all the page is loaded. Usually, the buying process happens there, but it's really important that the first visual cue that you have is the product that you selected and the most important conversion CTAs that you have on that page. But this will be highly dependent on the use case and the app we are talking about. Okay. So let's assume the user is interested in the product, okay, and it will be added to the cart. And there are several ways to display products on the cart. But let's assume an independent cart overview before the checkout process. So the longer it takes for the cart page to load and become interactive, the fewer people will move through the checkout process. You will lose users before the paying option. So again, we need to understand how much time are we taking to make that page interactive and how is the loading levels of that page. Finally, we have the checkout process. We do not consider the checkout process because it's usually made by third parties like Stripe that have already performance mechanisms in place. But in some, mapping these customer touch points and understand what is happening in each phase of the journey is crucial to get the clear picture of your specific user journey, the behavior of your users, and what are the actual bottlenecks in terms of performance that are driving your users out of the app, or at least reducing your engagement. So now I will let Rui to dive deeper into what affects those KPIs and how to take meaningful conclusions that will help you improve your performance.
Thank you, João. So I hope that at this point, João and I were able to give you some insights about if you're concerned about being successful in your mobile application, why should you care about things like time to interactive, fully loaded time, video startup time, buffering events. All of these, let's say, performance KPIs, as João mentioned, are highly related to things that you're trying to optimize for your business, like conversion rates, revenue, engagement, monetization through ads, for example. And so far, we have seen, let's say, the outer layers of the app success onion. But now the question becomes, all right, so I need to be aware of time to interactive. I need to be aware of video startup time. But what's happening underneath? So what are the phenomena that impair or impact this KPIs like time to interactive, for example? And obviously, there are a lot of other things, like including how you design your user funnel and your user journey throughout the application. But assuming that you have fixed those, there are two things that matter the most: processing and network calls. Processing is obviously dependent on what's the end user device. So you should be basically super focused on trying to make your application as performing as you can or in other words, as light as you can, to ensure that the phone doesn't get stalled in processing something. But from our experience and what we have been seeing so far with our partners in the industry, what really dominates the performance KPIs like time to interactive or video startup time is actually how long does it take to perform a network call, or in other words, how long does it take to fetch content from the cloud to the end user device, either if it's a video, it's an API call, or it's an image, whatever you're trying to fetch. Typically, for the vast majority of cases, what dominates the performance KPIs, and as a consequence dominates business success, is actually the network calls. How long do you take to fetch content? And so diving into the deeper layers of the onion, like take this example from one of our partners in the e-commerce space, and let us focus just on one of those KPIs. So what you're seeing here is basically the different performance KPIs in the user journey. And on the bottom, you see what are the network calls that are performed on each of these steps. And so as João mentioned before, let's focus on the scroll load time. And taking what João said, like your user basically did a search on your e-commerce application, and you're now trying to provide the answer to that search, right? So that search typically involves fetching from the cloud to the end user multiple requests, not only one. In this case, I don't know how many are there, but there are a lot. You can see that is actually the largest one in terms of number of requests. And this basically means that the user makes a search, and as a consequence, for you to provide the right answer to the user, you need to fetch multiple content from the cloud to the user's device. And now the question is, like, you have done your very best to optimize every network call, and so the probability that one of these requests goes wrong individually is not that high, right? Because you are using a CDN, you have compressed your content, and the probability that if you're looking at each of these requests goes wrong is actually low. But the problem is that from the end user experience, what actually matters is not the time it takes to load each of these requests. In this case, they are images, but actually what matters, as João mentioned before, is the scroll load time. And the scroll load time, so how long do you take to provide a smooth scrolling experience to the user, actually involves all of those requests. And now, if you do some math, even if the probability of individually each request going wrong is low, when you look at scroll load time, the probability of the scroll load time going wrong is actually the compound probability of each of these requests. And that's not that small if you do the math. So the table on the bottom, there are a few examples, but the one I like the most is the most simple one. So when you go to google.com, for example, that simple white page with a search bar, when you open that actually involves 31 network calls, so 31 requests to the endpoints of, in this case, of Google. And if you compute the probability of, when you do this and go to google.com, what's the probability that my experience, so the time it takes to load all of these 31 requests, actually falls in the percentile 99, so in the 1% worst case scenario. And the probability for such a simple page is not that small. So it's roughly 26%, which is quite significant. It's 1 out of 4 of the sessions can experience can get a very bad experience. And so basically what we are trying to convey here is that even if you are looking at how long does it take to fetch a specific content to your application, please bear in mind that what really, really matters is not how long you take to load one of the images, but actually how long you take to provide the experience to the user, which in this case basically means loading of all of those images. So you have to look at the compound experience and not to individual network calls. And so, again, as trying to wrap up with what we said before, like if one of these network calls that you have here goes wrong, the entire user experience is bad. And so the scroll load time becomes high, meaning that if the scrolling experience is slow, you will increase the number of users that basically drop out, or the number of users that do not convert or that do not buy a product. And so this is why, if you want to be successful in your mobile application, you have to make sure that you do your very best to optimize everything that is related to networking. So you have to make sure that your network calls are as optimized as you can. So that typically means, like, each use case has different techniques, each use case has different approach. But if we try to aggregate all of them in a few suggestions, let's say, or best practices, I would say that everyone should be thinking about compressing or optimizing the size of the content, in particular videos and images, because they are usually the heaviest payload that you have in your mobile application, meaning that you should do your very best to shrink the size of that content without jeopardizing experience. So meaning you don't want to compromise resolution too much, but you have to compromise something in order to optimize the size and as a consequence optimize the time it takes to fetch. Also, you should be reducing the number of as much as you can the number of network calls. And why? Because the more network calls you have, the higher the probability that at least one of those network calls goes wrong or goes slow. And as a consequence, the higher the probability that the user experience becomes slow, just for a single request. So whenever you can, either pre-fetch content to your mobile application, either cache it local. In the extreme, and like if you go to our podcast, we have a few episodes on that. You should be preparing your mobile application to work offline, meaning that if something goes wrong with the network, the user experience is still smooth. And so this is super important. Also, obviously, from the programming and the processing side of the equation, you should make your app as light as possible to make sure that you don't face issues with edge cases like lower end devices. But I think that overall, the one that is common to everyone is to use a CDN. So why should you use a CDN? At this point, I guess it's super known to everyone, but basically the reason is that by using a CDN, you are basically placing your content closer to the end users. And by doing that, you are speeding up the time it takes to load an image, a video, whatever content you're trying to do. So use a CDN to make sure that you have the content as close as possible to the end users in such a way that you are able to provide a good user experience. And still within this ecosystem of networking, let's say, and CDNs, like one recommendation is if you're still using HTTP 1.1, please don't. Please move, and this is widely available right now in any CDN provider. Please move to HTTP.2 because it brings a few optimizations, for example, multiplexing that allows you to speed up multiple requests at the same time. And as a consequence, that is typically a super easy thing to do in your mobile application and architecture, and you'll get a better performance from the network call perspective. Also, and this one is still, it's a new thing, so it's not widely available, but if you have the opportunity, you can also move to the newest version of HTTP, which is HTTP 3, or people also call it Quick. It will bring, in particular for API calls, for those small requests, it will bring a significant performance impact when compared to the other versions of HTTP. And so if you can, please move to the latest version of HTTP that you have available, either 2 or 3, to make sure that your network calls are super well optimized. And again, as a consequence, your performance KPIs are improved, so time to interactivity, video startup time, and as a result, the business outcome that you want to have with your mobile application is optimized as well. So now the bad news, like even if you do all of the optimizations that you can, that does not mean that your job is done. So even if you have leading edge CDNs, you're compressed content as much as you can, you're using the latest versions of HTTP, you still need to be paying careful attention and constant attention to what's happening with respect to the network calls that your app performs. And why? Because basically a mobile app is connected either through cellular, 4G, 3G, or even 5G and Wi-Fi. Those are wireless medium. And as a consequence, the instability happens over the wireless side of the equation. And today you have no control about that. And this is why when you look at recent market data, and so, for example, the map that you have on the screen right now is a map from Uber. And Uber is a superbly optimized mobile application with a vast infrastructure spread across the globe, or at least in the regions where they operate. And still, when you look at tail end latency, the results are not good. So, and this is happening basically because, again, the wireless link instability is affecting your user experience. And so you should be paying attention to all of this, right? What's happening there, and try to keep optimizing everything that you can do. Try to identify regions or areas where your network calls are getting slower, and for that case, maybe customize some part of the user journey so that you don't get impaired by the fact that the network there is very slow. Like the result of this instability that you guys have today in the market is that you still see a lot of buffering. Like if you look at the most recent MUX data, you have at least half of the sessions today experience at least one buffering experience. And recall that if the video buffers, you will be losing users there. The worst part is that the experience is highly unstable. So what do I mean by that? And I can tell a story, that a personal story. So before going to personal story, like generally speaking, it means that same user, same network, same device, same place can have a very good experience on a given moment, and 1 minute later can have a very bad experience. Why? Because, I don't know, probably is connected to 4G, the interference over the medium increase because you start getting a lot of people there, and so as a consequence, same user, same device, the experience goes from very good to very bad within a minute. That happens. And again, this is why you should prepare your application, ideally to dynamically adapt what's happening in the network so that the user flow does not get impaired. So for example, in video, you do that by using adaptive bitrate streaming, AGLS or MPEG-Dash. In images, or sorry, in delivering images, one thing you can do, for example, is try to get some sense of what's the network at that given point in time, and as a result, deliver the resolution that provides the best trade-off between user experience from the standpoint of a good image in the phone versus user experience from the standpoint of how long does it take to actually fetch that image. You can do that dynamically. And ideally, that's the ideal case, because it means that if the connectivity gets worse, the user will get a slightly worse picture, but it will get it fast. And remember that users care about speed, number one, right? My personal experience with this was when I was in India last time. We were in Mumbai, city center, financial district, actually. We were having lunch with a partner, and he had two exactly equal phones, same application. It was a video application, by the way. Opens up both apps at the same time, does the same action, and the first time it does that, one of the phones was super fast, the other one was super slow. Okay, so meaning that the phones have different carriers. So I think that one was Airtel, the other one was, I'm not sure, maybe Vodafone. After 5 minutes in the same place, in the same phones, in the same actions, the phone that initially was faster became the slower, and the phone that initially was slower became the faster. So that's how unstable it can get in terms of user experience. So again, all of this, in trying to wrap up what we are trying to convey here, all of this means that optimize your network calls as much as you can. Try to make sure that you are using the best tools in the market for that. Why? Because that will impair your performance KPIs, like time to interactivity, like video startup time. And as a result, you will be improving your business outcome. You will be getting more user engagement. You will be getting more revenue, more conversion rate, more ads shown to the user as a consequence of optimizing your network calls. However, even if you do your very best, your job does not stop there. You should keep monitoring everything that happens in your network calls constantly, so that you are able to respond and to adapt and optimize your application throughout the time to make sure that you are always providing the best user experience possible. And so right now, trying to wrap up, I just want to thank you so much for listening. So please drop, we already have a few questions in the Q&A. If you have more, please drop them. I will try to go through them in a moment. I just wanted to, like, João and I, we work at Codavel, where basically our mission is to make sure that mobile apps provide the best experience to every user, no matter where the user is, or no matter what's his network quality, basically. And so what Codavel can provide and can help is give you control about what's happening over your network calls, and as a result, provide a much faster user experience, and as a consequence, improve your business outcome. So the example we have there is for sessions drop out due to the video startup time. And as you can see, we can help you improving quite significantly that data. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, João. João, are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, sure.
So let me go through that. So Arun asked, and maybe this one is for you. What other performance KPIs do you use or are the best to map the customer journey? Do you use the same KPIs for every use case?
Okay, good question. Usually for video startup, for video streaming apps, the KPIs can be a little bit more standardized, like the playback failures, the startup time, buffering events, and bitrate. This is usually seen across all mobile apps that focus on streaming. For other apps, yes, we can have a lot of other metrics that can be relevant. It's not so standardized, but it will touch on some of the touch points that we saw today. Yeah, so we can go a little bit deeper, maybe in another session, about all the KPIs, but yeah, you can see a pattern there, but every use case is a use case. First, you need to understand what's the behavior of your users inside your customer journey, and from there, understand what performance KPIs will make sense to address.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, as you mentioned, like for video, it's, I would say, easy in the sense that when it comes to video, it's all about how long does it take to start, how many buffering events you have, and quality. When it comes to e-commerce, social platforms, anything else other than video, you have generic KPIs, but usually, and this is from our experience, we have to work with our partners to understand what is the intended user journey, and then map it to what you want to track in terms of performance. And it's not only map it, you actually have to map it, then monitor it, then analyze the impact, then iterate to learn as much as you can of what truly matters in terms of user experience for your end users. Thank you, João. So the next one is from Kumar, and he's basically asking, from Kartik, he's basically asking, how do we solve the problem of different devices? So device diversity, let's say. And this one, I think it's very complicated to answer. Like the extreme option is you provide a light version of your application. So you have your regular one, and then you build a light version where you remove a lot of features and you focus only on the core features. And that allows you to basically not improve, but remove noise in such a way that the low-end devices with less processing power, with worse connectivity, are able to, let's say, focus on what truly matters and provide a much smoother experience to the end user. So that's the extreme. In between, there are things like adaptive content delivery. So what I mean by that, again, for video, that's easy. It's adaptive bitrate streaming like AGLS or MPEG Dash. But for everything else, it basically means that you adapt the content that you are serving to the end user based on the network quality. So that means that, like, I'm oversimplifying, but that means that your application should be somehow sensing what is the network quality that the user is getting. And I'm not talking about how many Wi-Fi bars does he has on the phone. I'm actually talking about tracking the fetch times of the requests, and from that getting a sense of what the network for that user is, and on the fly adapt the experience, like choose the lowest resolution image if the connection is slower. Don't load a given thing if the network connection is slower. So for example, if the network connection is fast, when trying to load a feed, you can preload a lot of things that are below the fold, so things that the user don't see, but you will scroll in a second. If the connectivity is slower, you have to compromise there and load less things, but make sure that what you are loading loads fast. So that's, in the end, you have to adapt, ideally adapt to what's happening in both in processing and network quality. But again, network quality is typically what dominates the user experience. The next one, I'm dropping it for you, João. So Kumar is asking about how do we start tracking performance data?
Yeah, sure. So you have several ways to do this. Usually you can use third-party apps like Firebase or something around those lines. Also,
or Codavel.
Or Codavel. Also, if you, for example, if you have a streaming app, some streaming engines already provide some insights on that matter. But yeah, usually we advise not only to use the performance KPIs from the network call perspective. You can use like Firebase, but then you need to understand also the engagement. What's the other side of your performance? And for that, you have several options too, like Mixpanel or an APM solution. But that's the simple way to start. It's to find a good third party that you can integrate and start seeing what your results are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally subscribe that. So we have two more questions. If anyone has any other questions, by the way, thank you so much for everyone who placed the question. And if you have more, please drop them. So the next one is from Vikram, and he's asking that why, if we are optimizing everything, like using a CDN, image compression, lighter code, why do we still face a problem? Like, I won't go into the details, but basically what's happening is that everything that you do, and maybe a picture helps here, like everything that you do here, like compressing images, using a CDN, trying to diminish the number of network calls, are basically optimizations that you get on the cloud side, on the server side, right? So even if you do all of these optimizations, what happens then is that between those optimizations and the user experience, there is the wireless link, 3G, 4G, 5G, or Wi-Fi, right? And when you look at what's happening in a wireless link, when you look at what happens when delivering content from the cloud to the end user, you see that roughly 90% of the instability, so 90% of the problems that occur actually occur between the cloud and the phone antenna, right? And so all the optimizations that you are doing on the cloud side, they help a lot, obviously, but you still have 90% of the problems that are impairing the end user that you do not control, because they are related to the wireless medium. Finally, the last question. Wait a minute, because I lost it. Oh, there we go. So Siddhartha is asking, is asking about our last slide, about this. So what is Bolina, and why is it providing a much faster experience and less session dropouts? So again, I won't dive into the details. So Bolina is the Codavel core technology. It's basically what we do. And Bolina is a protocol that gives mobile applications an increased level of control about what happens in the wireless link. And meaning that with using this protocol, your mobile application will get more robust to things like latency, to packet loss, anything. Well, in other words, it will become robust to wireless link instability, meaning that users with or user sessions, with a bad network quality will still get a very good user experience because you are using Bolina. So in other words, it's fast and more robust to link instability. As a result, as you can see on the plot on the top, we provide a faster, improved performance KPI. So for example, we reduce the time to interactive from 1.7 seconds to roughly 900 milliseconds. And so as we've seen before, like by improving this performance KPIs and interactivity metrics, the user experience gets better, and as a result, your business outcome will get better. So in this case, basically what you see is that we were measuring the sessions dropouts, and the result is that because we provide the content faster, you'll have much less session dropouts, meaning that users are more engaged, meaning that you are able to monetize those users further. All right, everyone, thank you so much. So we went through all the questions, I hope. Yeah, that's true. Thank you everyone for joining. Like, we will be providing this webinar offline as well, so you will be able to see it afterwards and to share with your team and friends. Hope you had enjoyed. Any questions, any comments, anything that comes to mind related to this topic, please do reach out either to me or João or to Codavel team. We are easy to find on LinkedIn, for example. I also recommend, and now I'm selling my own fish, but I also recommend you, if you are into mobile app performance, we have a podcast, the Mobile App Performance Cafe, where we bring industry leaders from companies like Pinterest, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, to talk about specific topics within mobile app performance. It's a rather vast team, and these conversations with experts are very insightful for people that are trying to optimize their app. So I highly recommend that you join that. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a nice rest of your day, and hope you have enjoyed this session. And João, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.